What's up, YouTube? Kobe here for another video. And in today's video, I wanted to go over a lab that I created to help me study for my RHCSA certification. And in this lab particularly, is going to be with user permissions. And this is part of the guidelines that they want you to study. But even if you're trying to study and working with another Linux distribution, user permission is always there, and this can still be useful for you. So, but if you're, for my case and for other cases, for your RCSA certification, you got to study this, you got to know this. And once you're good with it, move on to the next. And so, yeah, I believe like anything in life, sports or, anything in life, when something's foreign or unknown to you, having that hands-on practice and getting your hands dirty is always the best way for you to learn something. And that's in my case. If I see something, I just read it, I really can't grasp it until I type it in, I write it down. If it's basketball, I keep on shooting the basketball, whatever it is. You got to keep on getting those repetitive shots, repetitive nature for you to understand what you're working with. And so back to the lab, yeah, this lab was designed to help you learn how to set the right permissions for users and place them in the right group on your system. And you will step into the role of a system administrator at a fictional company, Gourmet, that specializes in smart kitchen appliances and recipe apps. And your mission is to ensure that access control is implemented so all users can access the files that is needed for their duty. And setting up user permission is like important because if and access control because if you don't want to have data cross contamination. And if somebody's in a certain role and they don't need to know something about something else in a totally different role, they shouldn't have access to that. They shouldn't be able to read that data. They shouldn't be able to write that data, anything like that. You want to be able to have access control for people to do what they need to do to fulfill their duty. And this lab pretty much implements this, and you can use this in many different cases. If you have a home lab that you're working with, or you're in a corporate environment and you're learning new things, this lab right here will set you apart because most people, or not, I'm not gonna say most people, but some people just don't understand about user permissions, and it's something really good to learn. Overall, learning user permissions, access control, you can't go wrong learning this, and this is part of the guidelines for a reason. And yeah, so you'll be configuring the right permissions, assigning users to a respective group, and you will gain valuable skills to securing a secure system. And if you want to get access to this lab, you can find it at my website, kobesbell.com. And if you go to the main page, you scroll down, you should see labs for studying. You should see view lab files. You click that. RHCSA labs, you click that. And then you should see lab 2, user permissions. You click that, and boom, it should download straight to your account or your website. That's in your website, your computer. All right. And by the end of this lab, you will learn how to create and manage user accounts and groups, structure a directory system with appropriate ownership, apply basic and directory permissions using command line tools, and change ownership of files and directory using chown and chgroup, verify and directories using ls-l, and test access control by switching between the user accounts that you're going to create. And from there, we can pretty much get started with the lab. And I just wanted to know if you're following this lab with me, I'm gonna be going through it. I'm gonna be showing the answers. I'm gonna be showing you how to work with it. But if you're just using this as a solution, which the solutions are in the bottom of this document right here, but if you're going through it yourself, make sure you read and follow the instructions carefully. And if you feel like you're stuck on anything, again, you'll find the solutions at the end of this lab, or you can continue watching this video, and this video will have the solutions for you. All right, and from here, we can get started. So I will log in to my user account. And from right here, it says step 1. Let's go to part 1. Part 1. In this section, we'll create the main directory for our lab and the necessary user accounts and groups. So it tells us, number 1, create a directory named Gourmet Recipe in your home directory. Step 2, create subdirectories in Gourmet Recipe called recipe drafts, recipe reviews, and published recipes. And create the user accounts. Set up the following user account: chef, editor, and tester. So let's do these three first, and then we can go from the rest. So number one, create the directory gourmet recipes. So what we can do right now, we can just do make dir -v for verbose and gourmet underscore recipes and enter. And now I'm gonna just do an ls. That's L. You see that it's there, and yes, it is. So now let's cd into gourmet recipes. And now it wants us to make the following subdirectories: recipe drafts, recipe reviews, and published recipes. And what you can do right here is, instead of doing, again, make dir -v, and what is the first one called? Recipe draft. Instead of doing this, recipe draft, enter, and do that, and then do recipe reviews, enter. Instead of doing that, I'm gonna remove this recipe draft right here. You can just do this, and you can make it way quicker. You can do all in one, right? -v, you got the curly brace, and you do. I'm pressing dot escape to use my last argument. I mean escape period, and it uses the last argument, recipe draft. And then I'm gonna do that again because we just gotta do one more, recipe reviews, escape period. That's what I did to use the last argument, comma, and publish recipes, right? So I'll just type this one out. Publish recipes. And I press enter, boom, it made all these. Instead of doing that and then the next one and the next one, I just did it all in one line. And so now if I do a ls-r, we should see all our directories that we made. Let me move this right here. All right. And then it said what we have to do is set up the following user accounts: chef, editors, and then make tester. So what we can do is do user add. Well, we got to do sudo user add because we're not the administrator. Chef, editor, and tester. And so now what we can do is we can check our Etsy password. So let's do tail Etsy password, and we're gonna see all our user accounts that was created. And that is true. See, we got tester. I spelled tester wrong. Editor and chef. But I'll just leave tester like that. And so now let's set up the password for the new user creators that we made, new user accounts that we created. I'm going to set the password to lab2 to make it easy. And so don't ever do that if you ever have a password and you're making accounts or you're setting a password on your account on any system. Don't do lab2. Most things will allow you to do it, but we all know that's super insecure. So what we got to do is do sudo password chef, enter lab2, and see bad password. And then let's do escape period. Get our last few arguments, editor, lab2, and then let's do that again. Escape period, escape period, escape period. Boom. Tester is wrong. I spelled it wrong. Okay. Don't get on me in the comments. And lab2. All right. So now we got that. And now to clear the screen, again, if I could type in clear and press enter, but a shortcut is you do Control L and it will clear it out for you instead of having to type clear. And now it wants us to create the following groups. And so what we're going to do is run sudo group add recipe team, sudo group add testers, and add chef and editor to the recipe team supplementary group, and add tester to the tester supplementary group. And so to do that, what you're going to do is do sudo user mod dash a as in a pen, capital G for supplementary group, and then you do the name of the group, recipe team, chef, right? And so now if I do an ID chef, we should see that he's part of the chef's group and he's part of the recipe team. And now we can do the same for the for editor because he's gonna be in the same one. And then we can do sudo user mod dash ag, and then we're gonna do tester to the tester. Did I? Oh, testers. All right, I'm gonna do a control L to clear the page. And so now let's do this. Let's do ID chef, ID editor, ID tester. Right. And there we go. See, we have the editor in the recipe team. We got the chef in the recipe team. We got the tester in the tester. So there we go. And so now it tells us part 2. Now we will set a directory structure under your home and assign ownership. So create a structure directory under Gourmet with subdirectories, created earlier. Okay. And so we're going to assign ownership to these, right? And so now to do this, we want to assign ownership to the directories. And we want to make sure that people can access what they need to access. And so in this case, the gourmet recipe will be our own, the administrator. So we're going to own the whole home of this gourmet recipes. And so if I do a ls-l, right? Or let me see, let's see the back. Let me do a ls-l on curly braces gourmet recipes. Let me see that. Let me do ls-l now. It shows that me, the owner right here, I'm the owning user and I'm the owning group. So this first column is the owning user and the second column is the owning group, right? So that means I own this file right here, the gourmet recipe, right? So now if I cd the gourmet and I do a ls-l, it shows right here that me, the administrator, myself, Kobe, is the owning user and the owning group for all these subdirectories. But in this case, what we want to do is assign all the subdirectories to be the owning user to be chef. And now to do that, what we're going to do is do this. Sudo chown chef recipe team, because he's part of that group. I can leave myself as the owning group, but since I have access, since I'm the owning user and owning group for the whole gourmet recipe, I have me as the administrator have full control, right? I can leave chef recipe as this and he can have control of these, but I have full control of everything else, like of the whole gourmet recipe. So now what I can do is do gourmet recipe, and we can do recipe draft, and then we can do the same thing. We can do recipe review up, and then let's do publish recipes, right? And now let me see, almost typed in clear. Now if I do a ls-l, we'll see that chef now, and I probably shouldn't have did a ls-l before, but you'll see now that chef is the owning user and the owning group is recipe team. All right, and so now what we're going to do is part 3, and now we're going to be applying the permissions that is needed. So UCH mod to set the appropriate permissions for each directory. So for the gourmet recipe directory, set permissions so that the owner, you, have full control. Others only have read and execute permissions to subdirectory. And this is to allow me manage the system while others can just read it, they can access it, but they can't make any changes to it, right? because if I go back, right, let me CD back. I can just you can do CD back. If I do an ls-l, right, this shows that first off, this D right here is the directory, but me, the only user, these first three things, RWX, I have read, write, and execute. The owning group, I have read and execute, and others have read and execute. But in our case, what we want is only have everybody have read and execute, which is already there. So this is perfect. We already got that. So now we got that. And so second thing, what we want to do is have chef have full control of the recipe draft directory. Full control of the recipe draft. The recipe team group have read and write, and others have no access, right? And so now we're going to be doing the chmod. And this is because we want only authorized users to modify the draft and don't allow anybody else, right? If a chef have the recipe, he's coming up with the recipe, he want to design it, right? He want to come up with it. And if they have an editor, they can make suggestions to the change and they can read it and they can write it. But the tester shouldn't have no read, write, or execute of the draft, right? Because they're the tester. They just need the final product. That's their testing and final product. So testers shouldn't have anything to do with it. And so now what we can do is do sudo chmod. And then what is it? Rewrite and full control, read and write, and others have 0. So we can do 750, right? Oh, 760. 760 gourmet, and the gourmet recipe drafts, right? So now if I do an LSL, we see that recipe draft, right? So owner, which is the owning group, owning user, have read, write, and execute. The owning group, the next three things, right? They have read and write, which is the recipe team. And guess who's part of the recipe team? Editors. So they can read and write it. And anybody else, which is just testers in our case, they can't do anything. They can't even look at this. They can't even CD into this. And we're gonna demonstrate that later. And so now let's just do the other ones. Okay, so now we want gourmet recipe reviews. Chef have full control. Recipe team have full control. Everybody else have no access. So let's do the same thing. Let's go up. And so recipe reviews. And this one will be 770. And if you don't know what the 770 or the 760 means, this is essentially like the read, write, and execute. And so like I can demonstrate this. I can demonstrate this in a second. I can demonstrate this right here. Okay, so like to explain the read, write, and execute and why you had, for our example, we had 760, right, and 770, right? So we have read, write, and execute, right? Read is 4, write is 2, and execute is 1, right? And so you add 4 plus 2 plus 1, that is 7, and that gives you read, write, and execute. If you want somebody to have only read and execute, again, read is 4. If write wouldn't be anything, we don't want write, so that would just be 0, and execute will be 1, and you would just add that to be 5. And so all the time, right? So if we have anything, right, we have read is always 4, write is always 2, and execute is always 1. Just to remember that. Read is 4, write is 2, and execute is always 1. And so, for example, if I only want somebody to have no, if I don't want somebody to have no reading, but they can only execute and write. You just add 2 and 1, which is 3. And that's pretty much how that works. And so back to this, right? Now let's do a ls-l, and we want it for recipe reviews. What we wanted was the recipe team to have full control, the chef to have full control, and others to have no control. And so that's why we did 770, right? 7 is rewriting execute, 7 is rewriting execute, and 0 is nothing. That's not 4 plus 2, that's 1. That's all of them will be, they'll all be 0. So that's why 0, they have no control. And you see that here, right? Rewrite execute, rewrite execute. And finally, for this last one, for published recipes, we want the chef to have write access and read access. We want the editor to have read access only, and tester have full control, right? And another thing to kind of dive in, and if you're kind of confused on what you see right here, right? So you have, let me do this, right? So we have, in our case, D up front. Here, D right here is directory. And then we see rewrite execute. We see rewrite execute, and dash dash dash. I'm kind of separating them so we can kind of see it. So this right here, so this first 3 right here, that right there is the owning user, right? And let me kind of get this separated. This right here is the owning user. This right here is the owning group. And this right here that right there is the others, right? That's anybody else. So what this is saying, the first 3 things is saying the owning user have these permissions, the owning group have these permissions, and anybody else is not part of the owning group or owning users will have these permissions. And these dash 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 means, like, this dash means no permission for this, right? So no read, no write, and no execute. So in this case, this is going to be interesting. So chef have read and write, but chef and editor are under the same group. They're both under the same recipe team. And tester's under its own group and its own thing. And so this is how we're going to do it. We want chef to have read, write, and execute, right? And so way that we're going to do this right here is we're going to have, way that we're going to do this right here, we're going to have chef have read and write. So let's see this, read and write. 4 plus 2, which is 6, right? So let's do sudo chmod 4 plus 2 is 6. That is read and write. That is the first one. It's the only who user. The editor, which is part of the owning group, right? The second one will have read only. Read is 4, right? So we do 4. Owning group is 4. And then the tester have full control, which is, what is full control? 7. 4 plus 2 plus 6. 4 plus 2 plus 1 is 7, right? 7. And that is for the gourmet published recipe. Enter. And now what are you going to see? If I do an ls-l, we're going to see the owning group, owning user have read and write. The owning group have read only, and everybody else have read, write, and execute. So now that we got this right here, we can test these permissions and pretty much verify this, right? And we kind of already did this. We have it right here. We have all these right here, right? We have all this right here. So we pretty much verified it right here. We see what we needed. And now what we can do is we can test these out, right? Now let's do some testing, see that everything that we said is implemented as it should have been. Okay, so the way that we can do this is by, let's test this out now. So switch to each user and list all the contents, attempt to create a file in each directory, and attempt to modify a file, right? So what I'm going to do right now is, since I'm the administrator and I have full control of everything, what I'm going to do is make a file in each one of these and then allow switch to the user and try to attempt, like try to view it and try to modify it and try to, do different things as somebody, a natural user would do. So let me do touch, um, final recipe, final recipe. Oh, sorry. Publish final recipe.txt, touch recipe draft, um, first recipe, launch recipe draft, first recipe.txt, and sudo touch recipe review, um, um, recipe to try txt. All right, now let me clear out this page. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to switch to each of the users that we created, and we're going to try to list the content, attempt to create a file in each directory, and attempt to modify a file in each directory. And so we can start off with chef right here. And so let's go to chef. Let's do su dash chef, and it's going to access for the password, which we set to be lab2, all lowercase. Right now we're in the chef. ls what's that? A cd ls cd to home, ls cd to Kobe. Oh, sudo I don't think they're in a sudo file. One second. I'm gonna add them to the wheel group so they can have access, so they can cd to the home directory. One second. And all right, and so now we're back. So I got that organized for us. And so now we can go back to what it wants us to do, list the content of each directory. So we can do ls-l of published, permission denied, right? Because we have read and write, cd published, permission denied, ls-l recipe draft. We can see that cd recipe review, ls-l. There we go. And so now what we can do now is try to create a file. So let's do touch recipe to try v2, which we can do, right? We can do this is, if I do lsl, right? We can do this because in recipe review, we have full access, read, write, and execute. We have full access even in the owning group, but everybody else can't. In the recipe draft, right? I can cd into recipe draft, and I can do touch. Let me do an lsl. I can do touch second recipe .txt ls, right? Because I have read, write, and execute, right? Of this, we have read, write, and execute. But now, if I try to switch, right? Or even if I try to pretty much just do vim first cd recipe draft. If I try to do vim first recipe, we can do this in there. And now let's cd back, cd recipe publish recipe. Can't do that. Cd recipe review. Unless if I do vim recipe try.txt, we could do that because we have full permission. All right, so I'm gonna clear this. Cd back, and then let me switch users to editor. Lab 2, cd, boom, ls, right? So now what we can do now is do this. We can see this now. So so the owning user for all these right here, right? All these subdirectory is chef, right? He's the owning user, and he have rewrite and he have read and write, rewrite and execute, and rewrite and execute. The recipe team is the second one, right? So we have read only for publish, right? We have read and write for recipe draft, and we have full control of recipe review. And so let's cd into recipe draft. Can't do that, right? We have read and write. But if I do touch recipe draft, new recipe draft.txt, we don't have that, which is interesting. And so I noticed that I made a mistake with this one because if I do a ls, if I do a ls-l, right, it shows that as if I'm at the editor, right, and I want to be able to work with the draft and work with the review, I also will want rewrite it and execute. And so what I'm going to have to do is add that to this pretty much if I want to be able to have to execute. So I'm going to do a sudo chmod plus x to the, which one is it? The recipe draft. Now, if I do a ls-l, I will have rewrite and execute as the owning group. And so now what I can do is do ls-l to the recipe draft, right? And again, another quick tip, instead of me doing ls-l recipe tab draft, again, what you can do is escape period, and it will get the whole thing automatically, your last argument. And you can do escape period, you can get the last argument we've been working with. And so now that we see that, now that we have that, what we could do is pretty much test this out. So let's see if I can do a vim second, vim period dot second recipe, which I can do, right? Now I can edit these recipes. And so now what we want to do it now is for the tester. So tester right now should have full access to published recipes. So let me do a SU and testers, lab 2, CD, Kobe, Gourmet, Siri. And then now what I'm going to do is ls-la. And now I want to cd into published recipe, which I could do. And let me do a touch final recipe 2, which I can do. Vim Final recipe 2. I have full control. But me thinking about this right now, and this is the part of like learning as I'm making this video. I wouldn't want the I wouldn't want the tester to manipulate the final recipe, right? Because what if there's a malicious tester, right? And they want to destroy the recipe, the final recipe, like Plankton or something from SpongeBob or whatever. So I wouldn't want the tester to have actual functionality to change the recipe. So I'm going to try and change this, right? So what I'm going to do is a sudo chmod, and I put the tester and everybody in the will group, which have sudo. Typically, obviously, we wouldn't have that. I'm only using this for that case where it's privilege escalation for this case, so you wouldn't do that for any other user on your account. But there we go, got blurry. So now what I'm going to do now is just kind of change this. So I'm going to do a sudo -x and to anything in public um anything, oh yeah, in this directory, right? See, let's, oh, it's right, that's what it is. Sudo, sorry, chmod is right. Oop. And now I can't do a vim. And now I can't edit anything, right? I can't write real quick. I can't edit anything because it's only read only. And so that's the point. Like I want them to be able to view it, but I don't wouldn't want them to be able to edit it because they're the tester, and you wouldn't want any kind of tester that like manipulate any of your recipes because again, they might be malicious. And yeah, okay, that's pretty much it. So now we can just do a cleanup for the lab. R. There we go. Got it. And so now what we want to do is delete all the users that we created. So we can user-del R is everything from there. Chef, right? We want to remove everything that they had, any of their home files, home directory stuff that we don't might have forgot about. We want to pretty much remove those. And let's not forget sudo chef. Oop. And so now we're just gonna do a sudo -kill, kill the process first. And so now we're gonna do sudo -kill, sudo kill -stein 7568. All right. Oh, I see exactly what it was too. There we go. Sudo user-del -r into editor, sudo user-del -r test over. All right. And boom. All right, so pretty much we just cleared out the lab. We cleared out everything that, anything that was in the lab. Pretty much removed it. Clean up our environment for the next lab. So yeah, so that was pretty much the lab that I created, and the solutions are at the bottom. But yeah, if you enjoy this lab, and these are kind of learning experiences for me. There's things that I'm working with and I'm kind of learning on the go. But yeah, that's the part of it, is just learning, because if you want to be good at this, or you want to be able to be an effective system administrator, or just working with any Linux system, Red Hat Linux for my case, the RHCSA, you want to be able to get the hands-on experience. You want to do the mess ups. You want to kind of, go through the mud to be able to learn this stuff. And I mean, that's the point of it. So if you enjoyed this lab and it was useful for you, again, please like, subscribe, throw in a comment any tips or tricks that you have for me that I can utilize. Please share them. And there's little things like I forgot to do escape period, or doing the control L, or if I want to exit out a user, right? I just do control D. Those little things that you gotta practice, get that muscle memory to get, become a better system administrator working with Linux systems or Red Hat Linux or whatever it is. Practice makes perfect. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. And if you enjoyed it, again, like, subscribe, leave a comment, any tips or tricks that you have for me, throw it in there. And yeah, check out my website too. This is my website. I'm gonna have more labs on here that I will be designing. So yeah, stay tuned for more, and looking forward to doing more of these. So thank you for watching, and adios.